Hi, everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and my guest tonight is Dr. Thomas Campbell. Dr. Thomas Campbell is an instructor of clinical family medicine at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. He is a practicing board-certified family physician in Rochester, New York. He has sold over 1 million books as the co-author of the China Study with his father, T. Colin Campbell, PhD, and more recently is the author of the Campbell Plan. He is medical director at the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies, which is a leading provider in partnership with eCornell of plant-based nutrition certification. And please welcome to Healthy Living the other Dr. Campbell, Dr. Thomas Campbell. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to talk about a lot of things, and of course your new book, which I have to say is fantastic. And I'm not just saying this because I've never met you before other than by email. You're a very good writer, and I don't mean just scientifically. I enjoy reading. It's like you know how to write. You tell a story, and so it's not some boring scientific book. You're a good writer.
Well, good. Thanks. I appreciate hearing that.
I mean, so what's it like? I mean, you really, if you're not already a plant-based superstar, you have to be one because you have such an interesting path because you were an actor and then you're a best-selling author and now you're in medical school. What must it have been like going to medical school when you already knew more than all of your professors, at least about nutrition?
It was frustrating at times, but I knew what I was getting into. We had for the China study, we had the opportunity to speak in depth with Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. John McDougall about their personal experiences in medicine. And I knew what I was getting into. I had done the research on, how little nutrition education's in medical school,
wow.
How it's not really paid attention to. So my approach in training, and it was really in my opinion, the only reasonable option was to put my head down, do the work, learn as much as I could, do a good job, and there's no shortage of stuff to learn, and I did that and got through it, and now I'm looking to integrate sort of that world with the nutrition world.
So do you think that contributing to the China study in the way that you did influenced your decision to eventually go to medical school, or did you always want to be a doctor?
Oh no, I took a very, very winding path to medical school, and the main reason I ended up there was because of the China study, no doubt. When the China study we worked on for a good solid 3.5, 4 years of the manuscript full time, and it was me full time. I was consistently trying to get my dad to stop the millions of things he's doing and work with me, but no, it was wonderful, and I really got much deeper into the science and literature and the discussions of literature and nutritional science and health and medicine much, much deeper than I ever thought I would. And it ignited in me a passion. When you learn about something that can save so many people and yet a lot of people don't know about it, you kind of think, well, geez, I could put my energy into that.
Wow, that's just, it's such a great story because I know your parents very well. I've spent time with them. I've worked with them. They're just, I mean, God, to have them as your parents must have been amazing. And they said that you were a really good actor, though. I mean, they both said that you were really, really good.
Well, they're great parents.
But
I enjoyed it. I always actually thought that I would work on the China study for a year, and I originally was just going to do some editing and read my dad's writing and then go back to theater, and after a year, and I just ended up getting way, way deeper, much, much more into the material, and obviously taking much, much longer than originally intended, and I decided to run with it. But I miss acting, actually, but there's some acting in medicine.
Well, I was just going to say, Dr. Campbell, has any of your training as an actor benefited sometimes in your clinical experience, like dealing with patients or difficult patients, or maybe having to deliver bad news? Do you ever have to call in a sense memory or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's some, I would say theater is training in communication, human communication. And it may sound a little hokey, but I think that's really what it is. And so I spent some of my training, there's the written word, the spoken word, and communication, and thinking about motivations, how people relate. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that stuff, and so it does. I think it does help, not necessarily in a concrete, specific way, but it helps me, I think, relate to people a little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah. Why did you choose family practice? You could have done any specialty, obviously. Yeah. So why family practice?
Well, it wasn't the financial rewards. So it's just primary care is at the bottom of that of that by a long shot. But I think that my original intention, my passion, was to treat people in a more holistic way. And by that, I don't necessarily mean alternative way. I mean incorporating lifestyle, and particularly nutrition, exercise, that type of thing, into medicine. And so when I thought about all the specialties where I could do that, I thought that the specialty with the broadest base of knowledge, when you're interacting with people who oftentimes are still able to change, they're not stuck in the hospital, but people who are able to change, family medicine was it, and that was a very good training for that. And I went to a particular program at the University of Rochester here that actually was sort of the, we sort of brags, it's the birthplace of the psychosocial model of biopsychosocial model of medicine. So we actually had 4 months of training in my residency of psychosocial medicine, looking at family systems and counseling and that type of thing. So it's a very holistic, the most holistic perhaps, and broad-based training with focusing on actually communicating to patients of any specialty, in my opinion. Obviously, I like it, but I think that's a fair thing to say. So it merged it very, very well with my interest in nutrition and lifestyle.
Well, the only problem I have is it's in Rochester.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you right now, I'm having problems with that too. I'm having a little bit of snow rage.
Well, I don't want to tell you then that it was 84 today and I was sitting in a bathing suit outside. I don't want to tell you that.
That's terrible. No, that's
well,
good. I'm just jealous.
When are any of these great plant-based doctors going to come to LA? We got Craig McDougall. He went to Portland. You went to Rochester. We need one of you. Well, is there any way I can get you out here?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm sure there's lots of friendly plant-based doctors out there. What's so exciting about this is that I'm meeting more and more doctors all the time. Who are very interested in this way of promoting health and actually treating illness. That's the big step. Not just wellness, but actually treating illness. And there's more and more doctors who are actually getting on board with that.
Yeah. When did you transition to a plant-based diet? Because I'm trying to remember, because there's 5 of you, right? Four boys and a girl in your family. You have 4 siblings. At what point did your dad say, "Okay, we're doing this now," and your mom Karen had to start cooking these ways? Do you remember how old you were when that happened?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. We kind of disagree about it, but the reason we disagree is because it was very slow. I think my dad went to Oxford for a year for sabbatical, and so I was very lucky and fortunate to live there for a year when I was about 8. And I think we started very lightly cutting back on some animal foods at that time. I mean, my favorite used to be sausage patties for breakfast, and meatloaf, and everything. And then over the next, 5 years or so, we sort of cut back, and it was a typical transition. We were going towards a healthy standard American diet where it was more white meat, lower fat meat, and low fat milk, low-fat dairy foods, and good helpings of fruits and vegetables, but the quote-unquote balanced meal. And it wasn't until late middle school, 12-ish, 13-ish, where we started doing the weird stuff at the time, which was getting soy milk, which only came in these powdered options, that didn't mix. It was always like this goopy, gross stuff that you had to get used to. And that was more middle school. So I was sort of vegetarian into and through college, but lots of cheese, lots of dairy, lots of processed oils and other processed foods. And it really, and then I, like a lot of people, transitioned into my early 20s when I was started working on the China study when I was became more whole food plant-based and ditched the dairy and cut back, way back on the processed foods. So it was, a 10-year process. And I'm still working to improve my diet.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's good because that's encouraging for people to hear that they don't necessarily have to do this overnight.
Right.
No. So your book, The Campbell Plan, The Simple Way to Lose Weight and Reverse Illness Using the China Study's Whole Food Plant-Based Diet, is that available now?
It is. It's funny you ask because I was just looking as I think this is probably normal for most authors. You're kind of obsessed about when the book is released. You get nervous and start looking online and stuff. So I think it's actually available in Italy, strangely enough. The Italian version is available, but the English version will be available March 24th.
March 24th. And would you like people to buy it? Do you have a website? Would you like us to go to Amazon to buy it? Because it is a great book, guys. I've read it twice. I read a pre-release copy in September, and I read the regular version just the other day, and I know you'll enjoy it. We're going to talk a lot about it through the rest of the call. So where would you like us to buy it?
I think I don't have a strong preference. I've recently kind of liked Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
But there actually there's a pre-order special where if you pre-order it ahead of time, you can get access to 3 really nicely done videos that my publisher put together, and that is the best place to look for that is on my Facebook page, which is The Campbell Plan.
That's great. That's good. I was just going to ask you. And what is your preferred website? The one through the Colin Campbell Center for Nutritional Studies, or do you have your own website?
Well, there's a website we set up for the book that has a free excerpt. People may be interested, and that's thecampbellplan.com.
I bet they will. I bet they will. So speaking of the book, I had mentioned that I really think you're a very good writer because most of these books they're still good, but they're just kind of scientific, but you weave stories into it. Like I love the one about your grandmother who was the fisherwoman, little personal things like that. But I'm just going to read a couple things that just with me that just cracked me up. Like you were writing and you say, you can put lipstick on a pig or grass in a cow's mouth, but you're still eating muscle and fat from a pig and a cow. Just the way you turn a phrase. Or the other one I love where you said, I don't care if you buy your grass-fed beef straight from the farmer at the Saturday market and drink milk straight from the cow's teat. I just love that. Or when you were talking about, I think my favorite was when you were talking about GMOs and how they're genetically altering pigs, and you were saying something about this little piggy isn't going to market. So you have a great sense of humor, obviously. It comes out in the writing. It makes it easy to read. Because I'm going to be honest, the China Study was not an easy book for me to read. I'm not a scientist,
Yeah,
but
it's a little denser.
Right. I actually I have it, but I actually bought it on CD because it was much easier. But this book is very easy to read. And I love it that you hit a lot of what I call the hot topics, that are talked about in nutrition today and a lot of the myths. And I thought maybe we could go over a few of them because just as a chef, there's certain things, I get all the time. And maybe you could debunk a few of the myths. And the first one being that I'd like you to debunk that I hear all the time. I took some notes when I was doing this I know, the phytoestrogens, the soy. I mean, so many people are afraid of soy now because they hear little bits of pieces. I don't know if it's on Dr. Oz or what, that if they're a man and they drink soy milk, they're going to get boobs, and that they're afraid that it's going to cause cancer instead of prevent cancer. So yeah, you talked quite a bit about soy and phytoestrogen. Maybe you could tell our listeners your thoughts on that.
I hear that all the time myself, and I think, I don't know exactly the timing of things, but that's probably 10 years ago or so. There was research showing that those populations consuming more soy had actually less breast cancer, and so they started figuring, is it the soy food? And they started looking at the soy and thinking, oh my God, and at some point found, oh my gosh, these soy foods have these estrogen-like compounds, and suddenly, if they have estrogen-like compounds, then estrogen-sensitive breast cancers, for example, is soy a problem with promoting those hormone-triggered breast cancers? And so that was enough. That story was enough to just incite really excessive and broad caution against, particularly for cancer, for these phytoestrogens, as if the idea, that human hormone-like compounds are in this bean somehow seems treacherous and, feminine or something odd is going on there. So there's a deep fear, a deep caution about soy. But if you look at the recent research, and it's consistent actually with that old research, the beginning research, that women who have breast cancer or women who don't have breast cancer, but they study who gets it, those populations that are consuming more soy have fewer breast cancers or breast cancer recurrence. So actually the women who are consuming soy do better. And when you look at the phytoestrogens in soy, you see that some of them act as estrogens. They do have some estrogenic activity depending on the receptor and all this stuff. But actually some of them act as anti-estrogens. So they go into the receptor and they just sit there and they block its activity without really doing much. So it's very, very complicated. It gets very, very complicated very quickly. But when you look at the research, soy is not a danger for breast cancer. And it has never been shown, it's been studied. It actually has been studied. It's never been shown, for example, to have a great impact on other hormone-related processes. So, male hormones or for things like menopausal symptoms. When they've done studies on those issues, soy has not had a big impact. So I just tell people, forget the phytoestrogens. That's really kind of a distraction. And it is important. What the estrogens and the hormones your body makes are important, but the phytoestrogens that actually come in the bean, forget about it. That's not a big story. So go ahead and eat soy. I do caution people to eat unprocessed soy.
Yes.
You can have so much, processed soy powders and even soybean oil, right? That's very popular.
Yeah.
Soy protein.
Or the soy protein isolates, which are not healthy,
Yeah.
or the soy candy bars, or the soy ice cream.
Yeah. Stay away from all that junk. But soybeans, edamame, some tempeh, which is relatively unprocessed, and maybe some plain tofu here and there. I have absolutely no problem with.
Sure.
Even for women with breast cancer.
Do you think possibly, Dr. Campbell, that these women, when they did the studies in Japan and they had better health and better outcomes from eating soy, do you think possibly also that they in general had a better diet also all the way around compared to us?
Yeah, I have no doubt that's true. Better diet and probably other changes as well, but that's I think probably true.
One thing I would say, because you do have chapters about organic and GMO, and you can tell me, and feel free to disagree with me, but I do tell people that if they do eat things like soy or corn, that is one thing that maybe they should be buying organic just because of that, or do you have strong feelings about that?
No, I think that's reasonable advice. I'm not aware of evidence that really suggests that GMO or non-organic or conventionally grown foods are the source of our major problems. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a distraction in itself. I mean, the biggest health decision you make is plant versus animal, whole versus processed. That's the top 10 of the health decision making. And then after that, if you want to go organic or non-GMO, I'm all for it. And with the GMO question, it's stunning how little research has been done on the human health effects of GMO, and we just don't know. It hasn't really been studied. There's not good evidence that it's harmful, but there's really not evidence of any type. So it's likely not nearly as important as the two choices I described: plant versus animal, whole versus processed. But
sure.
If you can get organic, go for it.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, because like you say, I mean, like even if soy were bad, which I don't believe it is, anything's got to be better than drinking milk. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. Because you said in the book that, I'm quoting, that there were reviews evaluated hundreds of studies and found that there are no nutrient differences between organic and conventionally grown foods that are likely to be of any health significance. So that was sort of interesting because I know so many people are just well, it's got to be non-GMO, it's got to be organic. Well, first it's got to be a plant. And I think we have to agree on that. And then it's got to be whole, because if you're eating non-GMO organic, soda pop, you're not going to be any healthier than somebody eating maybe some conventional kale, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Organic brown rice syrup that is contributing, 2/3 of the calories of the health food thing. That's not healthy because it's organic. But and the same, that whole mentality actually is what there's the whole local food movement, and I like the local food movement. I don't want to disparage all of it, but there's a part of that sort of local food movement or back to basics kind of approach that makes it okay to eat tons of animal food or lots of animal food as long as it's local. The grass-fed beef. There's even a small minority of people who are the raw milk, the unpasteurized milk, grass-fed beef, and so I think that's where, I start to wonder, oh my gosh, this really is a distraction from where the much better evidence, of looking at plants versus animals.
Sure, I could not agree with you more. It's funny because I developed a soy allergy in my 50s, and I wonder if it has something to do with what they've done to it, not the soy itself. So that's very cool. So you talk a little bit about the Mediterranean diet, and maybe you could debunk that myth as well, because people, we both agree that whole food, plant-based is best, and oil is not a whole food, and many people would agree that it's actually a harmful food instead of a health food. But you talk a little bit about the Mediterranean diet, because so many people who watch these television shows say, they're on the Mediterranean diet because it's healthy. Well, it's probably healthier than eating at McDonald's every day, but compared to the diet you recommend in the Campbell plan, it's not all that. So talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet is probably the most popular diet that's recommended within conventional medicine. When people do recommend, of course, you get the whole spectrum, but so I hear it all the time that people want to go to Mediterranean diet, and it's sort of this nice moderate diet, that everybody feels everybody can follow better. And when I think of the Mediterranean diet, it gets kind of confusing, and you think about it from an honest scientific point of view. There's absolutely lots of good evidence that the Mediterranean diet is there's better health outcomes than many standard Western diets. And when you look at, there's a Lyon heart trial, for example, where there was a dramatic reduction in heart disease events, heart disease death in people with heart disease if they followed the Mediterranean diet, which did have plenty of oil, but had a lot more fruits and vegetables and so forth. So it is healthier. I consider it, I think of it as a big, long spectrum of plant-based diets. The Mediterranean diet is somewhere, far away from the standard American diet, but not quite to the whole food plant-based diet. But when you look at the heart disease death rates in the Mediterranean, and then you compare them to some of the heart disease of some of the other traditional cultures around the world that we know about. When my dad went to China and studied China, there were 2 counties in China that had over 100,000 people where there was not a single recorded heart disease death before the age of 65.
That's incredible.
And there, you can look at some of the other traditional cultures that everyone probably has heard, bandied about, the Papua New Guinea Highlanders, Tarahumara Indians, and so forth. And there's not much heart disease in those rates. So in those places. So if you're standing in the middle of China in the 1970s, in rural China, in one of these counties, and you're looking at France, you're sitting there thinking, why do these people have so much heart disease? So it's really a matter of perspective, and that's a very simplistic way to look at it. But it's the same thing with these trials that people with advanced heart disease who go on a Mediterranean diet. Yes, far fewer of them in some of the trials have recurrent events. So it's definitely healthier. But then you ask, well, why are so many of them still dying from heart disease when we know that a no oil whole food plant-based diet is more effective in terms of actually reversing disease and keeping a greater proportion of people alive. It's all so that, and then you can look at evidence on oil and its specific effect on blood vessels, for example. And if you give people, there's an interesting little study I found. I talk about in the book where there was a small group. I can't remember the number. I think it was 20 people. They put in a hospital and they gave them IV fats, or they gave them oral fat by mouth. And
wow.
These were polyunsaturated fats, so they were theoretically probably people must have think they were healthier. And within hours, within a short period of time, after exposure to these fats, people had higher blood pressure, they had higher heart rate, their blood vessels' ability to dilate was tampered, was dysfunctional, and was tamped down. And if you imagine exposure to that oil breakfast, and then again at lunch, then again at dinner, it's sort of a constant assault on your blood vessels, and it's consistent with the evidence when you're comparing like the rural China or very low fat intervention diets with the Mediterranean diet. So it gets, I'm very conservative. I try to be quite conservative and honest with myself when I'm not certain with something, and it does get a little bit fuzzy because there's not a lot of evidence. For example, we don't have the perfect trial comparing a Mediterranean diet with a whole food plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these things are kind of indirect, but the way I piece them together personally, I really think that the no-oil, whole food plant-based diet is quite a lot healthier. And then when you even just step away from the evidence and you start thinking about it just from a common sense point of view, one of the things I wanted to do for folks in the book is look at what is oil. And if you compare the nutrients in corn to the nutrients in corn oil, or the nutrients in olives to the nutrients in olive oil, or soybean oil to soybeans, you just look at the table one time, you realize all of the good stuff of the food that nature provided
is taken
out. It's all been pressed away and eliminated. There's some antioxidants in some oils, but you've lost so much stuff, and you're just left with pure fat. So it's just in my mind, it seems actually very obvious that we should not be consuming oils.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Campbell, but I find even as a chef who's also a bit of a health educator that it seems to be one of the hardest concepts for people to grasp. Like, I don't have a problem convincing them that sugar's not a health food. They think they know that, whether they like it or not or eat it or not. But they believe from, again, Rachel Ray and Dr. Oz, EVOO, Heart Healthy, and, they think they're going to die if they don't douse their food with oil.
Right. I see. I just had that conversation on Monday with a very well-known chef. And a very, very talented chef interested in health. It comes up all the time, and it's just there's a tremendous amount of confusion around oil.
And even if it were healthy, and I don't believe it is, I teach an ultimate weight loss program in Los Angeles, and just from a calorie density standpoint, if you're trying to lose weight, and most Americans are overweight or obese, it's the worst thing you could eat.
Right. And here's a thought, too, for you. If you want the calorie density thing, when I was, again, not to reference the book all the time, but when I was going through this topic.
No, please do, because we want people to buy this book because it's a wonderful book. So please reference the book. And I don't, go ahead.
When I was thinking about the calorie density, if you put a table together, the amount of food you need to consume of whole vegetables, to equal the calories that's provided in a tablespoon of oil, it is astonishing. You need to eat cups and cups and cups of a lot of different vegetables to equal the calories provided by 1 tablespoon of oil. And that really drives home to me that when you could have a huge giant plate of salad, absolutely piled full with a lot of different vegetables. As soon as you put a tablespoon of oil on that plate, you will be consuming mostly fat. If you count up all your calories, you'll be getting it from mostly pure fat that's protein deficient, fiber deficient, mineral deficient, vitamin deficient, and it's not a good practice to encourage.
And it won't fill you up, but it will fill you out.
Yeah, it certainly will fill you out.
And please talk about the book. I wanted to ask though, was this book a little bit easier to write than the China study?
Well, I guess it was. The China study had so much information, and working with my dad, I cherish the memory even now of it. The opportunity was just a once in a lifetime, very, very personally special opportunity. It's hard working with a family member and writing and deciding, no, this sentence has to be this way, has to be that way. So in some ways, just writing it myself without the density of science that the China study has. I mean, I love the China study, but without the density of that, it was easier. And it also was fun. It was fun for me because one of the most interesting factors of all of this that's a little bit new to me as a doctor, really through my medical training and working with patients, is this aspect of behavior change.
That is the hardest. I think that's the hardest part, don't you?
It's absolutely. It's so hard, and it's sort of like the golden. I don't know, the golden chalice at the end of the road. It's what we need to figure out is how to help people change, and I do get into that in the Campbell Plan where I talk about what things help us be successful in behavior change, because it's so important. It is so important.
Yeah, because everybody wants to lose weight and feel better and get off their medications, but not everybody does it because, like you say, the change is daunting. It's too hard. Other people aren't doing. Yeah, that is like the missing piece. I think the most important. So when we think of your dad, Dr. Colin Campbell, I mean, everybody just reveres him. I mean, we just want to bow down and kiss his ring, so to speak. Is he just dad to you, or do you don't? I mean, you don't have the same reaction to your parents, right? There's just mom and dad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we argue and
get
mad at each other, but I think that when I was growing up. I had no idea what my dad did. I knew he was in Cornell. Occasionally there's some sort of big news story with him, with a quote from him or something, and some of his research was featured. But he didn't bring it home, and it wasn't my life. And when I worked with him on the China study, and I really learned his personal story and the amazing work he's done. Certainly, he's still dad. He's just a guy with all sorts of quirks and flaws, like all of us, warts and all. But he's just a giant, a true pioneer in this area, and to be witness to the journey he's had and learn some of the lessons that he's learned, from his mouth. Is amazing. I mean, I have just enormous respect for my dad.
And you're named after him, right? Aren't you the one that's named after him?
I'm named after my grandfather, his father.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, does it bother you when he's disrespected? Because when people attack him, because he is such a lovely man and such a nice person, when people attack him or the China study, I just get really mad and want to get my claws out. Does it bother you when you see him attacked, or do you have the same kind of, like, you let it roll off your back?
No, it does bother me. It does bother me, but it's there's different aspects of this whole area. Honestly, I think there's a lot of frustrating things in the public realm of nutrition. If I'm honest with it, we tend to be so sort of religious about things and have 100%. Things have got to be 100% and 100% certain and this or that, and it comes from all the angles. I mean, with social media, we're just sort of a bunch of roving lunatics in different tribes attacking each other. It seems like sometimes when things are going bad, but it does bother me a lot, because people are so flippant and so rude sometimes, and don't realize that people are watching and reading and listening. But ultimately, you've seen this enough now. It's been out there long enough that it's pretty easy to you have to realize that these things, that these annoying things, are actually very superficial, and they tend actually to be only a small minority of people's reactions. So it's pretty easy to let it roll off, and I've worked to do that.
It's probably better. It's probably better for your health to not hold on to all that anger and resentment either.
Yeah.
So, are you involved at all with your brother Nelson's film Plant Pure Nation? Are you in the movie or?
I'm not. No, I was in medical training while he was putting that together, so I was totally accounted for in Rochester. But I'm very excited about it. I haven't seen the full cut, but it's coming up real soon, along with their cookbook on the same pub date as mine.
It seems like everybody's kind of in the family business, huh? That's terrific.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. But before we get back to the book, which we have a few more questions about, I'm very interested to hear your answer to this question, because one of the things I ask almost all my guests is who inspired you most in your life? And I wonder if it's going to be the person I'm thinking, but go ahead.
Who inspired me? Well, it's hard to say one person. I would say my parents, both of them. Of course, my dad has been an incredible professional mentor in some ways, as well as a good dad. And my mom has been really the glue of our family, if you want to call it that, an absolute rock at the center of everything that we do. Very supportive people, and I've tried to take some from my mom and some from my dad, and failed in some things, and it's just like everyone else. Just you get your flaws and your warts, but I've tried to learn from both of them, and because they both have unique contributions.
Your mom's adorable. Your parents are just they're fun. I did this television show, as you know, because I invited you to be a guest, but apparently you have to work and see patients all day.
I know. I was annoyed about that.
And I was in New York, and I wanted you to be a guest, but I got your parents instead, and they were just, the funnest part about doing this TV show was just spending the day with your dad, your mom, Dr. Esselstyn. The show was great, but the really great part was just hanging out with them. So that was the best part. So tell us a little bit about your habits, because we like to get a little personal on healthy living. I'm sure you walk the talk. So what do you eat, and do you exercise?
Yeah, I do. I try to eat a whole food, plant-based diet. I have been cutting back on eating out because it's virtually impossible to get anything that I consider interesting eating out with that I'm 100% sure has no oil.
I know it is,
or isn't just all coconut milk, for example.
Yep.
So I try to cut back on that. My wife is a very good cook, and she actually enjoys food. She's kind of a foodie.
That's great.
So that's made it easier. We both eat the same way, which is very, very important. And I usually start out the day with, very boring boxed cereal or oatmeal or I make my own muesli. But
I saw a video. There's a video of you doing it. I saw it.
Yeah, and some fruit, and then lunch is leftovers from the night before, and then dinner is usually a one-pot meal, pasta or a brown rice dish with curry. Kind of typical stuff. I try to get green. One thing I've been working on and trying to do is get leafy greens every single day, a good amount, at least a cup of cooked leafy greens every day.
Esselstyn will tell you 6 times a day if you've got heart disease. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said Dr. Esselstyn will tell you to eat them 6 times a day if you have heart disease.
Yes, and that's a great recommendation, and I've been working on getting up to a cup a day.
That's terrific. That's it. What do you do for exercise? I imagine you must be so busy just being a doctor in general, but like you say, family practice, it's people are always going to be sick,
Yeah.
It's not
it's busy, but I this past summer I ran a marathon, and so I run marathons. I get inspired and pick a marathon. I run marathons.
Okay, this is you sell over 1 million books. You eat perfectly. You're like Superman. What don't you fly planes too?
No, no, I'm definitely not. Definitely far from perfect. That's for sure. I don't eat perfectly, but I try to do well.
You know what?
But I run, and then in the wintertime I keep eating like I'm training for a marathon, but I don't do any exercise. so I get a little extra warmth, you know.
That's funny. I'm going to use that. People think I
eat into it this summer.
I'm going to use that. Because people say I eat a lot, because I do, because I eat low calorie dense food. But I'm going to say I'm training for a marathon, even though I really haven't planned to. You know, like I said, we've talked on email, but this is really the first time in person. And the sense I get of you is that you are your parents' children, because you have such humility, and that's the one thing I noticed about your parents is they are so humble, and I sense that kind of rubbed off on you a little bit. Even though you've sold your books have sold over 1 million copies, you're not all Hollywood on. You haven't gone all Hollywood on.
Oh gosh, no, yeah. I mean, I've just been it's been not, we never thought that it would be so successful, and it's really was my dad's story and my dad's research. So I was just really an honor to help him bring it to the world, and from there it's just been just a surprise, a wonderful surprise. So
When people come to your private practice, are your books in the waiting room for them to buy, or do you just give every patient one?
No, I am a part of a university practice, and I do not push my books on anyone, or I don't have them around. Most of the people who see me have no idea about my nutrition background.
That is so interesting. So if they don't listen to you nutritionally, you don't stand up and put your hands on them and say, "Don't you know who I am and what book I wrote?"
That wouldn't go over very well. No, I don't do that, and it's tough. The people I have a relatively poor. I mean, more than half of the majority of my patients are either Medicaid or don't have insurance. So it's not necessarily a high health literacy group of patients, and they're not necessarily aware at all of my particular background. And so it's really tough when you have a meeting, when you have a relatively limited amount of time with someone, to discuss the research. And I sometimes I push a little harder. Sometimes I let it slide and wait till next time I see them. I don't have any magical gift in terms of discussing it with people, but it is. I will say it's very grounded. When I wrote the Campbell Plan, I was much more in the realm of quote unquote normal people and normal environment than I was.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because for some people that even though the first thing I always recommend when people are considering going on a plant-based diet, I always say if I could wave a magic wand and just change one thing, it would be to get rid of dairy first, foremost, and forever. But like you said, the China study is a more difficult book to read, but this is a book everybody can read. It's accessible to anybody with any level of education or knowledge, because it's well written, it's fun to read, it's easy to read, and I really like it. And one book will lead to the other, I'm sure. When they'll read this one, they'll say, hey, I want to find out more maybe about the other one,
That's right, yeah. I think the China study is unique in terms of its comprehensiveness, and that's really what's been so convincing for a number of people. Forget the internet commentary and the quote-unquote debunking commentary, but the book has, the China study is only one chapter out of that book, and there are many other chapters with research from dozens and dozens of other people for other health conditions.
Yeah,
and when you look at it comprehensively, it's so powerful. It's when you look at the depth and breadth of evidence, and so that took a lot of time to get it. But the Campbell Plan is sort of the how-to, and then I'm hoping, that people will get that interest. Either they'll come from the China study, or they'll want to know more and then go to the China study, because I think the China study has that sort of unique depth.
Sure. And the fact that it was called the Grand Prix of all epidemiological studies by, I believe, was it the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal? I mean, that's pretty impressive. I got to tell you, for a young kid, you're doing pretty good, kid.
Well, that particular quote actually was regarding the research project itself.
Yeah.
So
But
that
still,
was my dad doing pretty good.
yeah. Well, still pretty. Hey, you got basically this. It's still pretty good. It still must feel
it's
good.
pretty good.
Yeah. Did it take a long time to write the Campbell plan?
Yeah, I was actually in residency when I was writing, and so
my goodness,
the residency rules are that you can't work more than 80 hours a week, and you have to have 10 hours off between shifts and at least 24 hours off per week. Those are the new and improved soft rules. There's not much time, but you just turn into sort of a working machine, I guess. I don't know. I did it on my time off. I did a lot of. I wrote a couple papers for CME publications. I wrote a paper for Primary Care Reports, which is like a CME continuing medical education, like a medical education journal for physicians, and another one. And through that process, I did so much work. I was like, I should use this work and keep learning, and I'll just keep writing. And I had the material for the Campbell plan that sort of grew out of that.
I mean, most people have enough on their plate just to get through medical school, and then but you write another book. You're incredible. You say something. I love how you phrase this. You were talking about breastfeeding, and you said if we could get the benefits of breastfeeding from a pill that would be sold by a big company to every single mom in America, it would probably be bound by law to give their child this pill. And I thought, and that quote made me think that if the plant-based diet were a pill, it would be the same thing, Yeah,
I totally agree. If it were something as easy as a pill, it would be like immunizations, but much more so. I mean, you would be really required to take this thing to be in the military, probably go to college, go to public school, et cetera, et cetera. It would be absolutely required.
One of the hot topics in plant-based nutrition, and we had Dr. Clapper on the show a few months ago, and he talked extensively about this, and that's DHA. And you wrote that just because DHA is present in the brain and eyes doesn't mean that if we stuff more of it into our mouths, we will have better brains and eyes. By that logic, if we ate more bowels, we will have stronger digestion. If we eat more lungs, we will breathe better. I just like the way you write. That's why I'm reading so many of these quotes. But can you talk a little bit about DHA? Because people are, they hear these little snippets, like on Dr. Oz. I hate to keep talking about him, but I think that's where people hear these things. And so that they get obsessed with things like omega-3 fatty acids. They're so worried about this, whereas most Americans eat too much fat, obviously. So if you could talk a little bit about this omega-3 issue and that you don't have to get it from salmon or fish and DHA, and how much do we need and where do we get it?
Well, there's two essential fatty acids, the omega-3 fat and the or ALA or the linoleic acid omega-6 fat. Those two fats we have to take in our diet, and then we can make all the downstream fats from that. We can make so omega-3s. From omega-3s, you make EPA and then DHA. We hear so much about DHA. We can make that as long as we have enough omega-3, but you can get lost in the details really, really quickly. It gets enormously confusing because you start getting these arguments that, well, we don't make DHA very efficiently. I mean, there's just a single percentage of the omega-3s, that single-digit percentage that we can convert ultimately into DHA, and we know that DHA does perform vital functions in our body. So then we start worrying, where are we getting our DHA? And you can actually look at research, and vegans have been found to have actually lower levels of DHA in their body. So you start putting all these details together, and you can start getting really worried and like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But you have to step back and ask yourself, are we having a rash of DHA deficiency? Have we ever seen a wide prevalence of DHA deficiency? And the answer is no, we haven't. So maybe the body isn't supposed to convert omega-3 into DHA at alarmingly high rates. Maybe it's supposed to be limited. I don't know these things for sure. It's certainly not my expertise, but I think that the ruckus is all about sort of getting lost in the details.
Yeah.
And picking out one particular finding or one particular feature of these things and trumpeting it out of context so that we've forgotten what we're actually caring about or worried about, and that is, these vitamin deficiencies or not even beyond deficiencies, are these things, is supplementing these things or eating food with these things linked to better health outcomes in some particular way? And the answer, we really don't have good evidence that, putting more fish oil in our mouth in a pill, eating a lot more fish, taking a DHA supplement, we don't have good evidence that these things are beneficial. I mean, we're trying, and maybe, to be fair, maybe we haven't studied it quite enough. It's kind of a hot new thing. Maybe we will find that we need to have higher levels of DHA, and it just hasn't, with the right study, hasn't quite yet been done. One of the things that, in my mind, I think is sort of a gray zone is particularly vegans. There aren't enough vegans to do a lot of well-done long-term studies on vegans. So, which is the vegan diet is kind of a very unique, restricted diet. If does that pose are there particular health concerns with DHA in a vegan diet? There's no evidence to suggest that there's any health concerns at all. Maybe the research hasn't been done because it's hard to do. But I generally say you can get lost in the marsh of those details almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And when you step back and you look at the health outcomes, health benefits, we know that a whole food plant-based diet with no fish and no animal foods reverses heart disease.
Absolutely.
And we know that those people in traditional cultures with whole food plant-based diets and small amounts of animal foods very small amounts of animal foods have no heart disease.
Right.
So what are we getting all excited about here for?
Yeah.
In these things, they don't have a rash of mental disabilities. They don't, because their brains aren't working. They don't have a rash of DHA deficiency, blindness, because their eyeballs can't work. So we take a step back and we can relax a little bit. There's no urgent crisis from DHA deficiency, and all of these people who have been eating mostly plants for a long time. It's interesting science. I think we probably have more to learn, but at this point, we don't need to worry about getting stuffing our face with DHA supplements.
Right. Well, you recommend in your book, I believe, 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and eating leafy greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
If you want to get, it's nice. All the research is in favor of omega-3 and that omega-3 ratio to omega-6, and so you can boost that up with the tablespoon of flaxseed or chia seed, and that has a lot of omega-3s. And there's also omega-3s in particular plant foods. So that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think the only thing you'd probably agree is B12 is necessary for vegans to supplement. That would be the one thing for sure.
Yes. Yeah, B12.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said earlier, and I'm going to remember that because so many people come to me, maybe they're like 200 pounds overweight and they're worried about DHA and GMOs when we first have to have, like you say, plants over animals, whole over processed. Get those two things right before you worry about all the other things.
That's right. That's 95% of the battle. I think.
Love it. I love it. It simplifies it. And I just get a good feel. Just like if I read this book, I'd want you to be my doctor. I mean, I still do. You're a little far, and it's a little cold where you live. But just like I'm from the Alan Goldhammer school of this because I've had a certain past where I am very strict, and some people say too extreme. I'm one of these crazy SOS-free vegans. I'm not just oil-free, but I'm sugar-free and salt-free. But I like what you wrote because you were talking about sugar, And everything is backed up, by the way, in your book with, reference to scientific journals, which I love. And it says the evidence is not strong enough to suggest that you must obsessively avoid all added sweeteners in your food, but you should avoid all predominantly added sugar foods, sodas, candies, pastries, and many cereals, as well as fruit juice, sports, and energy drinks, for example. You will likely be far healthier in the long run. As with many of my recommendations, people struggling with weight problems, eating addictions, and diabetes may need to be far stricter. And so I like that you didn't just say, yeah, because that's where I am, somebody struggling or had struggled with food addictions, and that's why I'm so strict. But you kind of leave it open that it's not great. Certain things like oil, it's bad. The recommendation is none. But I think it's good that you had a little bit of flexibility there, but then you acknowledged that there are people, for whatever reason, that need to be stricter, and then that's okay too.
Right. I think one of the things that I hope, people maybe who have been in the area for a while and kind of read a lot of stuff, I hope one of the things that they take away from the book is that processed foods, are terrible. And when I think of the processed foods, the three biggies that plague my patients are sugar, oils, and refined flours.
Yes.
And when you look at the nutrient, I try to compare the nutrient density of these things. The refined foods are actually as naked in terms of, from a nutrient perspective, more naked than animal foods. You get more nutrients in animal foods and minerals and in animal foods. So processed foods are not good, and we focus so much on the animal foods, but processed foods aren't good. And so I don't. You may have noticed I don't approach anything absolutely, because the science doesn't support, especially nutritional science, where you're using so much indirect evidence of this or that and kind of piecing the weight of the evidence together. It's hard to say anything. You have to be 100% anything, to be honest. So I try to limit that 100% approach, but and by the way, this may upset some readers, but when I'm looking at the evidence, I can't even be 100% sure that some very small percentage of diet, low single percentage of diet can't be food and still be a very healthy diet.
Right.
And not that I'm ever encouraging that.
Sure.
But here's the bottom line, is that whereas nutritional science may be a little blurry around the edges, behavioral factors become very, very important. And so when I'm working with people to improve their diet, I actually think in many ways it's easier to look at it black and white. You have strict rules for yourself, and you don't touch this or that, whatever you're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Even if nutritional science says you can have a little bit, from a behavioral perspective,
absolutely, it's too hard.
Easier to have those bright lines.
That's like telling a smoker just have 10 cigarettes a day, or an alcoholic will just have a little bit of beer. It's very hard for most people to be moderate.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, this has just been so great. What's on the horizon for you, Dr. Campbell? You've already got one best-selling book under your belt, another one to be released. And, where can you go from here is what I want to know. What haven't you done?
I am terrifically interested in changing the medical system,
that's
and from the inside out, from a very traditional point of view, using good science, and bringing this to the medical system is so woefully behind,
broken,
in terms of helping people be healthy, and we've got to change it. We've got to change it. It's just there's so many bad outcomes in so many different ways from our current predicament. We got no choice. We got to change it. So I want to find ways in my practice and my future career, and that's what I'm working on now, and trying to find ways to make this dietary approach work within the medical system.
Wow. Well, that's a noble goal. I can't think of anything greater that you could do. And so thank you so much for your work and for your time. And please, once again, tell our listeners where they can find the Campbell Plan, where they can find out more about you and your work.
Well, they can look on www.thecampbellplan.com for an excerpt and information about the book. And if you want to get the pre-order offer, take a look at the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/the Campbell Plan, and I think there's some videos there that have the announcement of the pre-order offer that you can click on there, and you get more free videos. It's about 15 minutes, I think, 12 to 15 minutes of really nicely done videos on some of these hot topics that Rodale put together.
Wow. And then, of course, your work with the Colin Campbell Center for Nutritional Studies, that's another place they could find you if they wanted to, perhaps?
Yep, that's nutritionstudies.org, and that actually is a fantastic resource in a whole bunch of ways. I mean, we have a very successful online plant-based nutrition certificate program that's offered through eCornell, which is Cornell University's online.
It's
online
fantastic.
thing.
I'm a graduate myself. Yep,
we offer continuing education credits for a whole bunch of health professions, so people can get those credits. And we have a wonderful website we just updated with a huge amount of a database of articles, actually, from a wide variety of people, and a newsletter that comes out every month. That seems to be, I think, getting better and better every month. So
I love it. So everybody, please rush out and buy this wonderful book, The Campbell Plan. If you haven't read the China Study, you must have been. And if you're listening to my show and you haven't read the China Study, you have to have been living under a rock, because that's my number one most recommended book. So all of you listening, thank you so much. And Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for your time, your passion, and the work you do. It's just been an absolute joy and pleasure interviewing you, and I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for listening to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Good night, everyone.